This is the hold report for Tuesday, January 6, 2026. The Venezuela Dividend. Markets typically price checks and balances as a risk premium. Debate creates friction. Friction slows capital deployment. Yesterday, the U.S. Senate effectively announced a zero-friction policy. Despite the administration bypassing the Gang of Eight to execute a regime change in Venezuela, the Senate GOP signaled they are unfazed by the procedural bypass. The reaction from the street was telling. S&P futures held steady. Why? Because Wall Street loves a CEO who doesn't have to wait for board approval. The legislative branch has voluntarily entered receivership. They have ceded operational control to the executive in exchange for insulation from the decision-making process. The most significant disclosure yesterday did not come from the White House, but from Senator Cynthia Lummis. In explaining her support for being bypassed, she stated, "I'm glad the president didn't try to talk to Congress about it first, because this place leaks like a sieve. From an institutional risk perspective, this is a stunning admission of insolvency." A sitting director of the firm is publicly stating that her own institution lacks the security clearance to manage the company's strategy. If the board admits it is too porous to be trusted with sensitive data, it has no claim to governance. Senator Lummis didn't just excuse the president. She codified the royal prerogative as a necessary security measure, and to avoid triggering the debt covenants of the Constitution, specifically the War Powers Resolution, the Senate is engaging in aggressive semantic accounting. Senator James Lankford provided the new guidance. U.S. involvement does not rise to the level of war powers unless the U.S. intends to occupy, dominate, control. This is a critical redefinition of the asset class. Old standard: conflict equals war. New standard: extraction equals law enforcement. By classifying the seizure of a foreign capital and its oil infrastructure as a drug bust rather than a war, the Senate has created a loophole big enough to drive an armored division through. It allows them to remain seated while the executive acquires the asset. Donald Trump dismissed comparisons between the Venezuela operation and the Iraq war on Monday, saying, "The difference is that we're going to keep the oil." Trump indicated that U.S. energy companies would be tasked with rebuilding Venezuela's infrastructure, a process he estimates could take less than 18 months, with costs reimbursed through revenue or federal funding. Despite the administration's pledge to revitalize production following Nicolas Maduro's capture, major U.S. energy shares like Chevron and ExxonMobil reacted cautiously in pre-market trading Tuesday, posting gains of less than 1% as crude prices hovered near $58.57 per barrel. In broader markets, a divergence emerged Tuesday between cautious U.S. futures and rallying Asian indices. While Wall Street remained flat amid lingering concerns over sticky inflation and the Federal Reserve's interest rate path, Tokyo's Nikkei surged 1.3% to a fresh record, and Shanghai hit a 4-year high. Investors simultaneously sought safety in precious metals, with silver jumping 2.2% and gold climbing 0.6%, adding to Monday's sharp gains, suggesting that despite the optimism surrounding the AI sector at the CES trade show, capital is hedging against ongoing geopolitical instability. Today is January 6th. 5 years ago, the threat to the capital was physical and chaotic. Today, the threat is administrative and orderly. The Senate has not been conquered. It has been streamlined. Senator John Kennedy's comment that he expects no changes to the GOP vote on war powers confirms the restructuring is complete. The legislature has successfully pivoted from a co-equal branch to a silent partner. It is a quieter arrangement. It is more efficient for the markets, and it effectively liquidates the overhead of a republic. The trade by the executive. Write down Article 1 to 0.